right?
So, do you believe that God exists?
Yeah, God is necessary. The world couldn't exist without God, yeah.
So, is it possible that God doesn't exist?
No.
So, what's the logical contradiction in God not existing?
Is that he's the necessary precondition that accounts for all potentialities. So if there wasn't a necessary being that could account for all contingent things, then contingent things wouldn't exist.
But that's premise one. Premise one. Or I guess I didn't go
I
into
don't
the
know,
argument
man.
yet.
I think that was more than one premise.
So
If we
that's
want
the
to do it as a
last claim.
syllogism,
That's the first claim that you just made, right? So you just claim that it's a necessary being,
yeah.
which would mean that. So do you agree then that necessarily, if God exists necessarily?
God is necessary.
Well, that's
So it's
the
just a
claim,
full
right? So
stop.
that's so then you would say that necessarily, if God exists, then God exists necessarily.
Yeah, he couldn't possibly fail to exist in any way. Yeah, he just exists.
Gotcha. So then what would be the contradiction in God possibly not existing?
The contingent things wouldn't be able to be accounted for in a rational way. You won't be able to justify anything rationally, but you can justify the fact that you
That's
exist.
a claim. Can you justify that claim?
Yeah, the claim is basically a transcendental argument. Okay, so you're trying to say, you know, let's say it could be a different way. You know, maybe God doesn't necessarily have to exist, but then you wouldn't have all the attributes to account for all of the necessary preconditions. The world exists in the way that it does, right? And that is for a reason, right? Because it's causal, it's in a causal nature. There's a causal nature to the world. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Every action is governed by a previous reaction. And so there has to be something that has the attributes to account for the causal material world, because the causal material world can't account for itself.
So you're just claiming that there has to be a necessary being?
There's a necessary precondition to the physical world, and that has the attributes of having unity and diversity, and it's the Christian God. You know, it couldn't be anything else. There's no rational justification for anything else. And the Bible even says that, you know.
So there's a lot of claims there, but we're back in the claim, right? So the claim was that necessarily, if God exists necessarily. So what's the contradiction in God possibly not existing?
Okay, because if God didn't exist with all of his attributes, all of the great making properties, then the world couldn't exist in the way that it does. Because the world's contingent, it means that it can't account for itself. Okay? So everything in the physical world is in a contingent state, and it can't account for itself. And so there has to be something that's necessary that can account for that. So St. Thomas Aquinas says, in order for a potentiality to be actualized, it requires a necessary actualizer. So do you agree with that?
Well, that's the claim you've been making. So necessarily, if God exists necessarily. So what's the contradiction in God possibly not existing?
It's that the world wouldn't be able to exist in the way that it did. It would contradict the world in the way that it is, because you wouldn't be able to have a causal world like this with all of the attributes that exist in the world, like relationality. I mean, we can go into each part of it, but in order to have a world like this, there has to be some thing that can account for it. Okay, and that thing is going to have all of the attributes to account for it in every way. And so things like intentionality, relationality, love, unity, mutual reference points, mutual understandings. All of these things have to be accounted for by the thing that's necessary in a non-contingent way, because it's necessary. So yeah,
why basically, would they have to? What do you mean accounted for in a non like there has to be a? Are you just making the necessary being claim again?
No, I'm saying that the world is evidence of a necessary being. Okay, and
okay, so that's a claim. So the claim once again, is necessarily, if God exists necessarily. So what is the contradiction in God possibly not existing?
Again, like I said, the reason it can't exist is because what you're asking for, the reason that God can't not exist, right? Can't not exist. Yeah, is because he is necessary. So I mean, you can say it again, but in order to account for things like
But that's a claim, right? So necessarily,
intentionality,
if
love,
God
unity,
exists,
meaning in the world, you have to have something that is capable of accounting for that set everything in motion, right?
right? That's a claim, right?
If there wasn't a
Necessarily, if
being
God
that had
exists,
those
God exists
attributes,
necessarily.
if there wasn't
That's
an
a claim.
intelligent being, then he wouldn't be able to create a world where people had a system through which they could justify things logically, right? You can't create an intelligent system without some level of intelligence. That's a necessary precondition to a world where logical arguments can be like justified.
Wait a minute. So
Okay?
you're saying you think there has to be an intelligence that, so you think that the necessary being has to be an intelligent thing that exists outside of physicality?
Yeah, there has to be something that transcends the physical world, that has all of the attributes to account for the physical world. It can't just be the physical world.
But that could just be a physical thing in the way that you're describing it. Does it have to have a mind?
It would have to have a mind to account for things like mindfulness. The only way
So
that you could account for in intellect
you're making
is
a
if you
lot of
had a mind.
claims here, dude.
Well, we're going over each
So
one and why it's the case as well. I'm
I
giving
know,
you a
but you're
justification
making
for
a
it.
lot of claims, right? Rather than addressing the
I'm
things
telling
that
you,
supporting.
it's complicated.
So
It is a complicated argument, so I
can you
understand why you're
support the
struggling.
claim that there has to be a non-physical mind as the foundation of reality?
Well, like, so the prime mover, okay, so the only rational justification for how the world came into being is that there's something that's set in the motion that has all of the attributes to account for it, because the physical world can't account for itself, and you can't
Why? What
justify.
would be the contradiction?
Okay, so there would either be a finite past or an infinite past in a physical world, right?
No, there could be a necessary being.
A necessary being. So you're saying
Yeah, I
there's an
claim a
infinite physical.
necessary being, but that's not relevant.
Okay, so
There
is
could be a
is
necessary being, there could be a brute fact. There's different metaphysical
is it
claims that
is
people
the
can make.
world
So it doesn't
is the
have to be an infinite regress.
is the world is the thing that at the beginning, is that the prime mover or not?
That doesn't matter at all whether I call it the
Well,
prime
I'm
mover
just
or
trying to figure
whatever.
out whether because it's sort
Yeah,
of two
that
different
doesn't
claims.
matter at all, right? You're trying to
Eternal
justify.
past, an eternal
So
physical
not Fox.
past, or
None of
something
that
that
matters.
transcends the
What
physical world. Are
you're
they
trying to
co-equal in eternality?
you're
Are they?
you're over talking me. So
Yeah,
what
but
you're
I'm trying to
trying to
find out
prove
your
right
worldview, and
now
I
is
know
that
you're
a
going to
mind
dodge.
can exist non-physically before anything.
A mind can exist physically. I'm not saying that
Non-physically before
non-physically.
anything. That's what you're trying to
Okay,
prove.
so the reason that we're justified in that is for all sorts of reasons. The prime mover must have moved of its own volition in order to
That
account
doesn't
for things.
support that claim. You would have to show that
How
minds
would the prime
exist
mover move
independently
if
of the
not by its
brain.
own volition? If the prime mover was moved by something outside of itself, then it wouldn't be the prime mover. The prime mover can only have moved of its own volition. Okay, that's the only way the prime mover can move. Then we've got other justifications, like the fact that
No, it could
in
have just
order
been
to
a
just
quantum
let me make this
fluctuation that
argument
doesn't
quickly,
support your
please.
position.
So it does, and I can give you more arguments as well, but I'll give you another one. In prior to creaturely minds, things were true. Okay, but in order for something to be true, that requires context. Context requires a mind. So there's a necessary mind that accounts for the context in which things are true prior to creaturely minds.
You just
Right?
don't understand what true means.
No, I don't think you do. Something
True
true is
is
something
a
that
property of
comports
a
to reality.
proposition.
I mean,
Propositions
people, you can give different
don't
definitions.
propositions don't exist without a mind.
Okay, and so are things true? So you're saying that it has to be a proposition in order for it to. So what's the context in which things were true prior to creaturely minds, then, Taka?
Well, what I'm saying is that you're defining true wrong, and that true is
I
just a
disagree.
property of a proposition, right? So, like, if a
I
cat
don't think
is
we.
on a mat, then the cat being on the mat would be the truth. Would, if it's on the mat, it's true, right? So that's just telling you
Okay, but
whether
by
the
what authority?
proposition
What makes
coheres
that
or not.
true? Is it that you've seen it? Is it that the cat is actually on the mat? So is it emergent property? Is it an emergent property of a naturalistic and materialistic world?
So none of that matters. What I'm saying is that
It
truth
does.
is just a property of a proposition, and so having, or maybe if it is like math, 1+1=2, right? So truth is just there, right? And so you're trying to say that that has to exist in some like non-physical mind, and it seems to be the case that that is only a property of a proposition. So that's not good
No,
for
well,
your
your
non-physical
definition
mind.
isn't.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, so your definition isn't the historic definition that everybody's used, and mine is. And
No,
also,
it's
your
not.
definition, you still didn't answer my question. So, from
I don't need to answer your question.
what does the
Your
truth
claim is
emerge
that
from?
a
Is it
mind.
that you're just going to dodge it?
Your claim is that a mind exists
And I already
without
gave you two reasons
a
why. I gave
physical.
you two arguments for why.
I just addressed them.
Okay, and I'm trying to address what you're saying. And I'm saying, okay, where does the truth of a proposition emerge from?
Whether it coheres with reality, that doesn't matter. What I'm
Okay,
saying is
so how do
that
you know that it coheres with reality?
if the cat is actually on the mat, right?
Okay,
Now,
and is
what
it possible that the things that you perceive about the world are just wrong?
if we are going to go here? You're conceding, so you are supposed to be
That's not. I mean,
explaining
it's a
why
valid
a
question.
mind,
It exposes your worldview, and
not
that's
Fox,
why
that
you're
doesn't
dodging it.
expose anything. You're
You've been
insane.
exposed. You have been exposed. You've got no
Not Fox.
justification.
You are supposed to be explaining how a
I'm
mind
trying.
exists
I'm
without
doing
a
it. Yeah.
body.
Okay. Yeah. I just explained it. Like, there's a necessary context in which things are true prior to creaturely minds. The
That's
only
a
way that
claim
something
that
can
you're
be true
making.
in
You
a
have to
context is
support
if
that.
there's a mind. Well, what do you believe that things were true prior to creaturely minds? Do you think we evolved from non-biological things?
This stuff existed.
Okay, and were they clashing into each other and stuff like that? Collisions were
There was
occurring.
stuff doing stuff.
Okay, so in what context was it doing that stuff?
That is totally irrelevant.
No, it's not. It has to be
This
in.
is like the
It's in
dumbest
a
line of
context,
questioning.
Taco. You're just pretending that context doesn't matter. Of course
Why
it
would it
does,
matter? There's
because
stuff
there's a
doing stuff
context
in
in which it's
physical
happening.
reality.
You're just ignoring that the context requires a mind.
You have no idea what you're talking about.
It's true. You can look it up. Look at the dictionary
The
definition of the
context that
word
you're
context.
talking
It does
about
require a mind.
requires a physical reality, not a mind. You have no idea what you're talking about.
In order to have a context, that requires a mind. There's a context in which things were true prior to creaturely minds. Therefore, there's a necessary mind that precedes creaturely minds. Okay?
You cannot
You don't
arrive
like that
at a
argument. You've
mind that
redefined the
way.
word truth
You
to try and
cannot
dodge the
arrive at a
argument.
necessary
But
mind that
everybody
way.
can
It does
follow along
not
with what I
work.
said really easily. It's really simple to understand. Even a kindergartner could understand this stuff.
You
So
cannot arrive at a necessary mind that way now, Fox. I've already explained why.
I've already justified the argument. Okay. So you're saying it's not a necessary mind. I'm saying I've given you two arguments to account for it.
And I've
So I don't know.
addressed them very thoroughly.
We can move on if you
What's the
like.
next
Other people
reason
can make
that
their
a
own
mind
decisions.
exists without physicality?
Dude, I just explained it. And also, people in your
Really
circle, what have they
badly.
said? A Boltzmann brain or something like that? T-Jump was banging on about Boltzmann brains.
You're
As if
just
they
moving
were...
into like global skepticism at this point.
No, I
If
am
you're
not
going
a
to shut
skeptic. I
down
used
your
to be a
own
skeptic,
sense
but now
data,
I understand.
yeah, if you're going to shut down
That's
your
not
own
my sense
sense
data. My sense
data and
data is
your
protected
own
by
everything,
the
you're just moving into
providence of the
global
Christian God.
skepticism.
The Christian God
How do you even know you
his
exist now,
providence.
Fox?
Because of God's providence in the world.
You want to go into global skepticism? How do you exist? How do you know you
Because
exist?
God
Is it
has,
God?
because God has revealed. This is why, because the
There
wrath of
you
God is
are.
being revealed.
You have to
I'll
have your
answer you if
sense
you want.
data. You have to have your sense data to read the Bible, not
It's
Fox.
not. It's not just sense data. It's you can through logic come to know the truth about God as well. God is
No,
the
you can't. You
pinnacle
have
of
to read it.
everything.
You have to.
Yes,
You have
yes,
to
you
hear
can. You
it.
can use logic. Logic. Okay, so what makes something true? Right. So let's say you're operating from Descartes' position, right? I think,
Not
therefore,
Fox.
I
You
am.
cannot
So
arrive
what
at a
makes that
metaphysical claim in
true?
that way.
What makes that true? Well,
A
it's not
metaphysical
me.
claim arrived at
I
in that
don't make
way.
the truth value of
Not
a
Fox. Listen for
proposition,
a second.
Taco.
A metaphysical claim
So what
arrived
is
in
it?
that way is not necessarily actually possible.
Honestly, bro, I just tried to explain to you about Descartes' demon and stuff. I don't know, man. It's I don't know
You
if this
can't
is going to
even get
go
out of
very far.
solipsism.
I personally have a justification to account for the reliability of my sense perception
And
because of the
that's
Christian worldview.
the book that you
You
read.
don't. No, that's the difference between me and you. You're trying to box
You
me in
have
with
to
you,
account
but it
on your.
doesn't
You have
apply.
to account for your sense data, which you account for
I
through a
can.
book that
Yeah,
you read.
God has revealed the world in a clear way so that everyone's without excuse. It
That's an
says in
assumption that you're
Romans.
adding
It's
on
not an assumption.
after
Let me
you
read
read
the
the
verse.
book.
Let me read the verse. Don't be rude, man. Come on.
Oh, you
Okay.
got to read the book. Yeah, you got
I've
to
got
use
to
your
read the
sense
verse
data
now.
to read the revelation.
I've got to read the verse now. The wrath of God is being revealed from the heavens against all the ungodliness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So you've got no excuses, Taco. God has
Yeah, I
clearly
don't care
revealed
about the
himself,
preaching, dude.
and you've got no rational justification for anything else.
Dude, you literally are using your sense data to read the revelation, and you're claiming the revelation
Yeah,
is
but I live in a.
justification for
I
your
believe
sense
your
data.
sense. I believe your sense data gives you a reliable picture of the external world too. But the difference between me and you is that I can rationally justify the reliability of my sense perception, and you can't justify the reliability of
What's a
yours.
rational justification for your sense perception?
Is that God has revealed the world clearly to us. He's given us the faculties to perceive his revelation. He's given us discernment so that
And
we
how
can
do you arrive
use
at that?
independent analysis to account for the
So you
truth
read the
claims
Bible?
that we
It's
reason to.
just circular, not Fox.
That's not. No, it's not. It's not. It's like the same as.
Suspiciously
So
circular.
two people. There was a guy. There was.
You have
It's
sense
not. It's
data.
not
You
circular.
read
I'll
the
explain it.
Bible.
Now you're
Bible
trying to build a
confirms your sense
narrative.
data.
This is
You
just
read the
narrative building.
Bible. The Bible confirms your sense data. You read the
It's
Bible.
not just
The Bible
that.
confirms your sense data.
It's not just that. There's more to it than that. It's a
Anyone else want to go?
self-authenticating system of justification. So it's like the guy who counted cards, right? So there was a guy who
So
came up
here's
with
the
a.
deal, not
Look,
Fox. Can you
Taco,
imagine a
if you
turtle?
don't let me explain my points without interrupting me, then I'm
This
not
is
going to
off
talk to you.
topic. Can you imagine a
It's not
turtle?
off topic. I need to be able to explain my points. You can't just build a narrative, otherwise I'm not going to deal with it. Okay? It's just
Okay.
ridiculous. So there's ways to independently verify things, right? So there's two people that independently came up with systems of card counting. There was a guy in Australia and a guy in America. Now the guy in America published a whole book about it and everything, but the guy in Australia, he didn't know. So he logged every single possibility of the outcome of cards in each particular situation and essentially developed his own like logarithm or whatever it's called so that he could accurately predict the likelihood of certain cards coming out in certain situations. He did that independently. So sometimes there's truth in the world that you can reason to through logic, right? You can have an understanding of the world, and then two independent people can account for all of the variables necessary to prove something. And so if you've got two independent people doing it, then you can have a third party
So you
who
can
can
use
assess that
induction, and
data
then you can
and
confirm the
have you
induction
can have
amongst multiple
mutual reference
people.
points, mutual understandings. This is all accounted for within the Christian worldview, right? You can't account for anything external to your mind because you reject the Christian God.
Not Fox. You just said that through induction, you are able to, which is like reading the Bible, you're able to receive the
Not just
revelation
reading
of
the
the
Bible.
God. And then
Not
through
just reading the Bible.
revelation of the God, you're able to confirm your sense data. And so
God
it starts
has
at your
revealed
sense
clearly
data and
through the
ends at your
world.
sense data.
God has revealed clearly through the world.
It starts at your sense data and ends at your sense data.
No, it doesn't. It's beyond that. No, because there's things that transcend my sense data that also account for it. Like things like, so how do you justify truth? Okay, so you don't have to rely on your sense data to justify truth. Okay, truth can be reasoned to through logic alone. Okay, so we don't need to rely on our sense perception in every case.
Is defined. It's a property of a proposition, not Fox. You're making
Okay,
a lot of
that's your fake
unnecessary
definition, which you can't
statements and pulling
justify.
in a lot of
That's your
unnecessary
fake definition,
baggage.
which you can't
You
justify,
can't
bro.
even justify anything you're saying. You landed in
I'm
circularity.
trying to explain it to you, but you don't want to hear it by the sound of things.
Not
You're
Fox,
suppressing the truth in your unrighteousness.
Your
That's what it
position
sounds like
is
to me.
viciously circular, not Fox.
It's not viciously circular because first off, I'm reasoning towards the ultimacy, and secondly, I've got a multivariate analysis to account for the necessity of my position. What you're doing is you're saying that I'm only using my sense perception to justify the necessity of God. I just explained to you that we can reason to the necessity of God through logic, and we don't need to rely on our sense perception.
I told you, I
So
agree. There's
everybody in the
necessary
audience can see, Taco, that I'm using a multivariate analysis, and even though you want to make it one-dimensional,
analysis of
I'm sorry, but you have failed. You have failed miserably in that attempt.
And poisoning the well instead of addressing
that's rich coming from you, Taco. That's rich coming from you.
Fox, is it your position that God is thinking everything into existence all the time?
God knows everything, and he's not. So God transcends time. So he's in a state of knowing. He doesn't think.
Okay, but does his mind sustain all of reality?
His mind upholds and secures the truth value of each proposition. Every objective truth in the world is upheld and secured in the mind of God. He is
saying
the
something is
mind that provides the ultimate context in which things are true.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is God says it's so, makes it so.
God he created the world. The world's created in line with him to some degree because it's his creation. And so obviously,
but in order for
the world acts in a particular way because in some ways it's in line with his nature. In other ways, obviously, though, he's given us the ability to choose freely, and
this is all just claims. You just make claims.
I mean, we can look to the Bible to justify that, but you're not going to like that either.
That would just be using
because you're circular.
I just tried to go through the logical arguments, and you refuse to listen to them. So
well, it's all presuppositions and claims when you're
supposed to be. It wasn't just presuppositions. We've got justified true beliefs.
We've got
justified true beliefs.
You need to calm down for a second. The first step to justifying a non-physical mind is proving that a non-physical mind exists.
I already explained all of that.
You would have to prove non-physical is a thing. Then you would have to prove that minds can exist without structure. Like, you've got a lot of steps to go.
I already went over all of the necessary arguments to account for that. If you want a more detailed breakdown,
this would require some type of empirical evidence.
If you want a more detailed breakdown, then you can ask me specific questions about the details. But
claims would require some type of empirical evidence, not Fox.
Well, I've got all sorts of different arguments to justify it. Empirical evidence isn't the only type of evidence. We have logical arguments.
The problem here is you justify your
histological arguments. We've got all sorts of different types of arguments.
You have your sense
archaeological evidence.
But you read the Bible,
the legal standards
justifies it. And
we meet the legal standard of justification based on the modern day court system.
And then you use it again, and then you justify it through that. It's just circular.
It's not circular. We've got a multivariate analysis. We've got worldview comparisons, logical arguments,
the Bible justifies itself,
evidence,
which justifies everything else.
Prophecies fulfilled, miracles that prove that things like prayer have positive effects.
Because it's true.
On terminal illnesses. It is true. You can look it up. Right? So the fact that prayers have an effect on people that are terminally ill.
That's called a placebo effect.
No, because there was a double-blind study, bro.
No, there wasn't.
Yes, it was,
No, it
and you can look it up.
Also, you
It's
mentioned
crazy,
something
man.
about miracles.
So-
Miracles
Yeah.
don't happen in the
No,
world.
but they do, and
No, they
you
don't.
can't account for them in a
It's
world without God.
miracles are nomologically impossible.
that's
They
another
can't
claim.
happen
Well,
in
yeah,
the
I mean,
actual
you're just
world.
gonna have to look up. You're gonna have to look up the studies then.
There are no studies on miracles because miracles aren't a thing. That's like saying you have to look up the studies on
We
the
just
anatomy
went
of
through it. We've got
leprechauns.
the
There is no
logical
studies on
argument.
the
You guys
anatomy
haven't
of
got anything. You
leprechauns
guys
because
don't even know your
leprechauns aren't
brains
a thing.
exist. You don't even know. You don't even know that you've got brains.
Which
Okay.
the funny thing is all of this is
So you
neither
can't
here nor
justify
there
anything.
because
Your
you
critique of me
initially made
based
the
on
claim that
nothing.
God is
I've got
necessary, that
worldview
God exists
comparisons, logical
necessarily,
arguments,
which would entail that there is at
miracles,
least one
historicity.
contradiction in
I've got
God's non-existence.
archaeological
Taco
evidence.
pressed you for what that contradiction
We've got
is, and
everything
you
on our
never
side.
gave that
You've got
contradiction.
absolutely
So
nothing.
if you could
You've
give
got
the
absolutely
contradiction
nothing.
in God's non-existence, that would be really, really cool.
I just explained it about
You
God.
haven't. You haven't.
I went
Actually.
through it. He's a necessary
No, you
being.
didn't.
You didn't
Yeah,
understand it.
that was your
whatever.
claim. Your claim
Look,
is that
you're
he's a
you're
necessary
showing
being.
your
But
ignorance.
what that means is that God's non-existence would entail a contradiction. What's the contradiction in
Okay.
God not existing?
Look, you're showing your ignorance right now. I already went over a number of
What's
different arguments.
okay? Go over it again. Maybe I wasn't here. Maybe I didn't hear it. Go over it
Well,
again. What's the contradiction in God's non-existence?
Okay, well, you wouldn't be able to account for the world that exists.
Well, that's
God
just a
has-
claim. That's not
God-
showing a
God-
contradiction.
No, well,
You're
I will
making
explain
further
it. I will
claims, but
explain
you're
it. Just
not
hold on
showing
a
a
second,
contradiction.
man.
What's
Calm
the
down.
P and not P? What's the
okay,
contradiction?
bro. It's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. So, yeah, basically,
Not
in order to account for the world that is, you'd have to have all of the attributes that were necessary to account for it. In order to account for this world, you'd have to have a being that has all of the attributes of the Christian God. It would have to be a deity. It would have to be able to account for mutual reference points, rationality, love, understanding, unity, mutual reference points, all sorts of things, mutual understanding in a non-contingent way. Okay? So because the world is contingent,
So how do you deal with?
there has to be
wait,
something
hold on.
that can account for it
By
that's
that-
necessary. In order for a potentiality to be
Can you guys hear me?
actualized, you need
Those are
necessary
just
actualizer.
claims. Like all of this
No,
is just
it's
you're
not just a
claiming
claim.
these.
It's
None
not
of these
just
is a
a claim. You
contradiction.
just don't
Do you
understand-
know what
you
a
just don't
contradiction
understand
is?
what
Can
it
you tell
means.
me what a contradiction is?
Obviously, I know what. I'm not going to sit here doing a kindergarten class. Do you know what a contingent thing is?
Yeah, something is contingent if it could have been otherwise. Now
Okay,
you
and do you know what something
answer
is
my
necessary-
question.
so do
What's
you know
a
what-
contradiction?
Look, dude, I'm not going to answer that because it's a child.
Yeah, because you don't know. You don't know what a contradiction
you're a
is,
fucking
and you
idiot. I
can't
know the
show
laws
that
of
there's a
logic.
contradiction
I don't
in
need to
God's
sit here arguing
non-existence.
about the laws
If
of
you
logic
can,
anymore.
I'm all ears. What's the
I'm not gonna
contradiction
waste
in
my
the
time with
state of
that
affairs
bullshit.
of
I
God
already explained
not
it.
existing?
He doesn't have the attributes to account for it. There's no way to account
That's
for the world
just
that
another
is.
claim. That's not
There's
showing
no
a
way to
contradiction.
account. Okay, are you going to let me respond? There's no way to account for the world that is unless there's something that's necessary that has the attributes to account
That's
for
just
it.
a reiteration of the claim.
What I'm saying is that the only thing that has the attributes to account for the physical world is the necessary God of Christianity. And it
It's
couldn't
just a
be
reiteration of
another
the
way.
claim
It
that
just
God
couldn't
is
be another
necessary.
way.
That's all you're doing.
So,
You're just saying God is
okay,
necessary
that's
because
fine
God
for
is
you to say that.
necessary, which
I'm
is
saying
not
that God is
showing a
necessary.
contradiction.
I already tried to go into it. I tried to go into the relationality, intelligibility,
Well,
love, unity.
I don't know what you mean
all of
by
those
relationality,
things.
but none of these
I
things has
know,
anything
and
to
I
do
would
with the
be happy to go
contradiction
over it, but
in God
instead of
not
having a
existing.
rational
That's what I'm interested
conversation,
in. I'm
you're
interested
talking
in the
over me and
contradiction in
acting
God
like
not
a child.
existing, which you have not yet shown.
You're a child.
You have
I'm not
gibberated
responding
about
to
a
you
bunch of
anymore.
things that aren't relevant and
Look,
aren't
I'm no longer
contradictions in the
going to
state of
dialogue
affairs
with you. Thank
of
you for
God
that.
not existing. So if you've got that,
I
I would be
appreciate you, bro.
very interested.
Have a good day.
Is he gone?
No, I'm just not talking to that guy. What's the point in talking to somebody like that? He's an
Yeah,
idiot.
what's the
Well,
point
you're
in talking
kind
to
of
somebody when you can't fulfill their
I tried
what they're
to
interested in?
go into the
You did not try
rationality
to.
stuff.
None
and
of
you just
that is
talking
relevant.
over.
None of
It's
that
a-
has anything to do with the
I have no
contradiction in God
interest
not
in
existing.
talking to you
So
because you're
it's
not
just not
listening.
relevant.
You're not listening. Everybody can tell he's not listening.
So you
I don't have to
you
deal
cannot
with people that
show
are acting
you
like
cannot
children.
show that there is a
I don't
contradiction
think
in God not
I'm not
existing.
responding to this guy anymore.
God's
He's an idiot.
non-existence, like there not being a God, is clearly something
I
that's
would have gone into
conceivable.
it.
We
but
can
this guy
conceive of there
obviously
being
is
no
retarded,
God,
so
and if
there's
it's
no point.
conceivable that there is no
think-
God,
I
then
think-
that's just to say that it's broadly logically possible that God does not exist.
I
And if
tried
it's
to go into
broadly
it with
logically
him.
possible that
Instead,
God
we've
does
got
not
to deal with
exist,
this, you
we
know?
can just reword that modally to say
You're
that
just
there is some
reiterating the same
possible
thing you said
world
earlier,
in
bro.
which there is no God. And if there is some possible world in which there is no God, then it just follows that God's existence cannot be necessary.
Yeah, but it's necessary.
Unless you can
So you
show
can't do
that
that.
there is a contradiction in God not existing, which would make it
Which I have
unconceivable.
already done multiple
And you have
times,
not
but you're
done
not
that.
listening. You're
All
not
you
listening.
did was rant and rave about things not
You're not
even
listening.
remotely
You're
related
not
to what you're
listening.
being asked,
You're
because
not
you
listening.
can't show that there is
How
a
can you
contradiction.
talk about ranting and raving? Listen to yourself. So you weren't listening. I already said about relationality and it being a necessary precondition. You've got the great making properties, and then you've got the necessary preconditions. And only the Christian God has all of the great making properties. You can look that up if you want. If you want to know one of the great making properties that are necessary in order to account for the world, it would be something like relationality. Okay.
great making
Oh, hang on.
properties? What
I
about-
missed a super chat somewhere. Hang on. I missed a super chat somewhere. Skeptics and Scoundrels said, I'd rather be a nihilist than a denialist. But I'd rather be a nihilist than a denialist. And I appreciate that, Skeptics and Scoundrels. I'm sorry for missing that. That was probably my fault. And then Frosty said, God is the devil and he controls people by pretending creation and proving death. The only viable option is to not assume atheism because it involves positing the fact that God supposes existence. That's weird. Thank you for the super chat, though. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you as well, Skeptics and Scoundrels.
How is my mic coming through? Is it real quiet?
I mean, I don't think it's that quiet. I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Donnie 12 Toes was saying that it was.
Yeah, they're just a little bit
cool.
louder than you are. We're just saying that I hear you.
Because
I mean,
I'm just trying to figure out.
Leo's
I'm
not
sorry, go
wrong
ahead.
in where that was going, right? Not Fox. So all of us can conceive of a not God world, right? And because all of us can conceive of a not God world, necessarily, if God exists, God necessarily exists. It's possible God doesn't exist, therefore God doesn't exist.
That
To
doesn't make sense.
To address
That's
Top
what I'm
G, he says the contradiction is that if God is the necessary being, then that makes God the precondition for all existence. Well, that's just a reassertion of the claim that God is necessary.
No,
You're
but
saying
what
God
I'm
is
taking
necessary
out-
because if God wasn't necessary, then God would be necessary. You're not showing that there's a contradiction in God not existing. You're not
Yeah.
showing how it's completely inconceivable that God doesn't exist, which is clearly false. Clearly
Okay,
false.
so that's why I went into the material world stuff, because obviously I don't know if you
Yeah,
guys
which is
have
irrelevant.
looked at-
You just went off
It's
into
not
irrelevant
irrelevant.
land
It's
because
not
you can't
irrelevant.
show that there's a contradiction.
Okay. Well, it's not irrelevant, and basically, there's only a certain number of worldviews that people could potentially argue for. Just because they can argue for them doesn't mean that they're potentially true. Okay, because they're all wrong.
Yes, you're a
apart from
prime
Christianity.
example.
Right? So, well, I can justify my positions within the principle of
But you
sufficient
can't.
reason.
But what you
And I
sure?
can
But you
account for
can't
them in a
show that there's a
coherent web of
contradiction in God
justified
not
beliefs
existing.
where
You
I
can't
don't
do that.
contradict myself. The only way that that's possible is in the Christian worldview, and I can explain exactly why. So,
Okay, not Fox. Real quick. Imagine a turtle. Tell me
okay,
when
I
you're
guess we
imagining
don't
a
want to
turtle.
hear the arguments for
Not
why
Fox.
God is necessary.
Not
We don't
Fox.
want to hear
Imagine
about
a turtle real
relationality.
fast.
You guys are just ignorant.
Not Fox.
It's
Imagine a turtle real
ignorance,
fast.
arrogance, and boastfulness. That's what you guys are
Not
doing
Fox.
right now.
Imagine a turtle real fast. Are you imagining the turtle?
I can imagine a turtle.
Now imagine a universe that's just a turtle.
That doesn't make sense. That's a turtle in
Can
a
you
void.
imagine it?
Not really. I can't really imagine.
You can't conceive of some possible
An
world where
infinite
all which
world
exists
of
is a turtle.
nothingness around a turtle? No, I can't conceive of that.
Just
I can
one
conceive
turtle.
of like a turtle on a black backdrop or something, or a turtle in a vacuum in space in a
There you
limited amount
go.
of space.
That's
Okay, but
the
that's
turtle
not
verse.
okay. That doesn't okay. So say that there's a turtle
Turtle
in a
verse.
vacuum in space, and is it underwater? Or is it where's
No,
it
no,
getting
it's
its
just in
oxygen
space
from?
like that. It's a turtle verse.
Okay, so what does
It
that mean?
exists by its own nature. It can't fail to exist.
Okay, and how does the turtle breathe?
I don't know. That doesn't matter.
Of course it does. How does the turtle survive and sustain itself?
Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it breathes in the void.
So it can breathe non-oxygen, and that's what keeps it alive.
Yeah, it's a magic turtle.
It's a magic turtle, okay. So what's the point of all of this? You've got a transcendental turtle in a world which you can't justify. I don't get it.
Yeah, so you've imagined that, right?
It doesn't compute.
There you go.
I mean,
That justifies P2.
I don't think that computes properly with me, bro. I'm sorry to say. Like
Yeah,
a
that
turtle in an
justifies in
infinite
your
world.
view
Like I
that
can't
it's
imagine
possible
like
God
it's like
doesn't exist.
Minecraft, right? It's got like that map that just goes on forever. So it's like, okay, so I can't imagine like the future stages of the map, even if it's just blackness. You know what I mean? I don't have the processing power to imagine like a infinite world of nothing.
You just justified P2, which means that argument is sound according to your position.
I
Welcome to
disagree
Atheism,
with
brother.
your
It's good to have
interpretation
you.
of this situation. So, what can I say?
Welcome to Atheism, brother. It's good to have you. You know your God
I'm
does
not.
not exist.
I'm not converted, bro. I'm genuinely not converted by that. Sorry to say. God is a necessary precondition to the world. He has
That's
necessary
the
attributes
first
to account for
premise.
the world. You don't want to hear it. Things like relationality are necessary preconditions for the world.
That's a
Right? The
claim.
world is relational. Okay, there's
That's a
relational
claim.
aspects of the world. You can develop an interpersonal relationship
Relational
with other
aspects
people.
within us, but
Okay,
that's a claim
yeah.
otherwise.
And so the thing that has all of the attributes to account for the world has to account for things like relationality in a non-contingent way. That
Yeah,
means
there's
that the
plenty.
necessary thing
That's
is able
nonsense.
to account for relationality
That's
in a
nonsense.
non-contingent way.
That's
No, it's not.
nonsense.
It's
You're just making
necessary.
up claims, dude.
That follows as a
Justify
necessity.
it.
Okay, I just explained why it follows. The world, in the world, things
If
like
you're saying that it has to
I'll
arise
give you a
from
different
the field,
example.
that's one
I'll
thing.
give
But if
you a
you're saying
different
that there
example.
has to be a fundamental relational being with a mind, that is a claim you're making.
I already explained that with the argument about a necessary mind prior to creaturely minds that accounts for the context in which things are true prior to creaturely
You
minds.
would both have to provide empirical evidence for non-physical to make that claim.
I just
and
have to
then you
provide
would
a
have
logical
to
argument, and I already did that.
provide. Yeah, you would have to provide empirical evidence for
I've
non-physical
already
and for a
provided a
mind
logical
existing
argument.
independently of a brain.
I don't need to provide more than a logical argument. A logical argument is a sufficient amount of proof.
A logical argument
argument
doesn't let
debunks any
the
possibility of the
logical
contrary.
argument without any like about what you're claiming would require some type of empirical evidence, right? Like, yeah, you can say that
No.
this so logical possibility does not conceivability does not entail possibility, right? So
That's
you
true.
saying
Exactly.
that
That's
a
your
logic
claim, actually.
you saying that a mind could logically exist without a brain doesn't mean that that's actually
That's
possible.
necessary.
That's a claim
That's
that you're
necessary.
making.
That's not possible. It's not
It's
a
a claim that
possibility.
you're making. That
It's
you're not
not a possibility,
justifying.
dude. It's not a possibility. It's a necessity. That's what the difference is there necessarily has to be a mind that accounts for the context in which things are true prior
Well,
to
you keep
creaturely minds.
saying that,
Because in
but
order
you're
for
not
there to be a
justifying it.
context in which things are true, it requires a mind. What you're saying isn't necessary. It doesn't follow as a necessity, and you don't have a justification to account for the necessity. So it's different.
Well, you have to provide the contradiction in it being
Yeah, I
possible
know. I've
that
tried
God
to explain
doesn't
it like
exist.
15 times. I'm only going to try once more because I'm getting bored of this. It's 11:40. Okay. So this is the last time. So in order, like the world exists and it's contingent. In order for contingent things to exist, there has to be something necessary, right? It's impossible for contingent things to exist unless there's something that they're dependent on, right? So there has to be something that's necessary. That's what St. Thomas
Do you
Aquinas
have an
that's
says.
argument
premise
for that?
one.
In order,
That
Well,
in
that's-
order to account for a
premise one,
potentiality, you have to have a
Necessarily,
necessary
if God
actualizer.
exists, God
okay?
exists necessarily.
In order
right?
to
That's premise one.
actualize, that's the premise. In order to actualize a potentiality, you need a necessary actualizer. Okay.
Yeah, what's the
So
argument
in
for
order-
that?
Let's say that the potentiality is me throwing a ball through a window. Now it's possible it hits the wall, the window falls off, I miss the window, all sorts of different stuff is a potential possibility in that situation. But in order for the ball to break the window, I have to throw the ball. I'm the
But you're
necessary
working within-
actualizer that's
but you're
required
working-
in order to
but you're
trigger
already
that
Yeah,
working
but
reality.
within.
I could put
Okay,
the ball in
and
a
in the
cannon
same
and shoot it
way-
at a window,
just
and it
let
would
me
still
finish
break a
my
window.
point,
So
bro.
I
You
can
don't
break
have
a
to
window with the
interrupt it
ball
right in the
absent
middle.
you.
You
So
don't
you're
have to
not
interrupt it.
necessary for
You
a
don't
win
have
for
to-
a window
okay.
to be broken
Well,
by a ball.
Dude,
Well, not only that, but
I am
but
trying
not only
to
that,
explain to you
you're
a
talking
point
about
about
something
how
within
God's
reality.
necessary. There has to
You're
be
talking
a
about-
necessary actualizer. In that
Yeah,
situation,
you have
I'm the
claimed
necessary
that
actualizer.
multiple
okay?
times. You have claimed
Yeah.
that, yes.
What
Yeah,
I'm
you
trying to
guys aren't
understand is
listening
where
to the
did
point,
you?
and I think that you're actually
Yeah,
retarded.
no,
at
the
this point.
analogy.
Like
Well, hold on, time out.
at least
Time out
one
now,
of the
Todd.
people in the room right
Time
now
out.
is retarded, and I don't
Time out for a
think it's
second.
me, honestly.
Hold on. The problem with this
Yeah, but
is
dude,
that
I'm
you're
trying
saying
to.
that
I
there's
was in the
something-
middle of a point. You
I'll
can't
bite
like
that
make
bullet. It's
out.
me. I'm
You
the
can't make
retard.
out like, oh, please, just give me a chance here. You guys interrupted me halfway through a really great point that I was
Because
making. You could have
that
learned
wasn't a great
something
point.
from. It
That
was
wasn't
a great point. It was a great
No, it
point.
wasn't,
It
because
was
you were
about
using-
It wasn't a great point. It was you
potentiality
making a
and
bunch of claims.
actualization, and why you
You're talking
require a
about-
necessary actualizer in order to
Yeah,
account
and
for
you're using your
actualization.
example.
And
your
you're a
example that you're
moron,
giving.
and I can't. Why would I? If you don't say something really smart, then I'm just going to leave. How about that? Let's go. This
Cool.
better be
Then I'll
good.
make sure to say
This
something
better
very
be really good,
You're an
bro.
idiot.
This is okay. Great, brilliant. So you
I
got
just said
anything to
something
say
really
that's
stupid,
actually
and you said you would
informative?
leave.
No, nothing.
Live up to what you just said. I just
I
said
will.
something
I'm
really
gone.
stupid.
I'm gone. You see this, guys? These are the people that you
That was the
associate
easiest way to
yourself
beat
with,
out bots.
Taco. This guy is a moron. Have a
People
nice
that
day.
actually have some
Good
basic
talk.
understanding of
At least
metaphysics
nice
and
try,
concepts like
Taco. At least you
modality,
tried.
you
Bye,
Yeah,
clearly
not
do
thank
not.
bots.
you.
Stop stalling. You said
Bye-bye.
you would leave if I said something stupid.
Bye bye.